Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If you're here for the State of Credentialing report reveal and panel discussion, congrats, you're in the right place. We're going to wait for a few more folks to join. And while we do so, I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll of our audience. We're about to review survey data from over 1,000 respondents that really helps define what learners are expecting from their next education or professional certification opportunity, and what successful issuers of credentials are doing differently. So before we dive into today's panel discussion, we really want to know, what's your biggest area of focus this year? If you're representing a certificate program, a product academy, a training organization, what are you most challenged by? And for folks just joining, welcome to the State of Credentialing webinar. We're about to launch a quick poll to get a sense of what aspects of program leadership are most important to you today. So go ahead and do this now. While we're waiting, I'll go ahead and share a couple of housekeeping notes and introduce myself and our moderator today. My name is Laura Scruggs. I'm on the marketing team here at Accredible. And while we're waiting to hear back from some of you about your areas of focus in the world of credentialing, a couple of reminders: we are reserving time at the end of our panel discussion to do some live Q&A. So if you have questions for our panel, I encourage you to submit those via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen here in Zoom webinars. We'll address some directly and then save some to be shared live. Secondly, this session is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to that recording as well as the full State of Credentialing report via email in the next 24 hours. And lastly, along with the recording and the report, all of us today in attendance are going to receive a shareable digital badge that'll celebrate the investment that you made in yourselves and in your organizations by being here, and it'll help keep the conversation going within your networks. So I'll go ahead and close our poll now. Seems like a lot of us are focused on enrollment, demonstrating the value of our credential programs, developing learning pathways, learning journeys, growing program revenue. And I'm very, very confident that a lot of you who have responded based on the feedback so far, definitely going to be covering a lot of relevant information in today's report review and panel discussion. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our moderator, Rochelle.
All right, thanks, Laura. And welcome again, everyone. As Laura mentioned, I am Rochelle Ramirez, SVP of Product at Accredible. As many of you know, Accredible is the world's leading digital credential platform, enabling education and training leaders to increase learner engagement, grow their programs, and connect continuing education to meaningful career outcomes. I am thrilled to be here with our incredible panel of experts, whom we'll introduce in a moment, to discuss this year's State of Credentialing report and how it impacts credential issuers. Before we chat with our panel, though, let's explore a few of the key findings from this year's report. Over the past decade, we've all witnessed the labor market and post-secondary education landscape fundamentally change. Learners are exploring non-traditional avenues such as certifications, online courses, even apprenticeships and boot camps again, to supplement degrees or gain new skills. While employers, on the other side, are expanding hiring based on skills and learning to fill their skill gaps and create a more diverse workplace. Verifiable proof of skills has truly become the new currency today. However, even with all the market momentum, credential issuers are under increasing pressure to demonstrate the value and relevance of their credentials to stakeholders. And with seemingly endless options, how do programs differentiate from one another to gain the learner's time and investment overall? This is why we surveyed over 1,000 learners and nearly 200 education and training leaders to see what learners want from their courses and credentials, and if issuers are delivering what learners want, and what the most successful issuers are doing differently to be able to grow their programs. So what did we learn? Ultimately, credential issuers have a massive opportunity. More than 9 out of 10 learners are planning to take more courses. They're actively looking for recommendation from their course providers. But there is a significant gap between what learners want in their courses and what issuers are delivering. So we're going to dive into some of the key findings here. Learners start, let's start with today's first insight. Learners highly value digital credentials for career advancement. We found 96% of learners who earned a digital credential consider it valuable for their career, and 78% believe it increases their chance of getting a job offer. And this is amazingly great news for the industry and helps learners connect skill development with career outcomes. Issuer and technology partners like Accredible still need to better educate learners on the true value of digital credentials. Because when asked what type of credential they would like to receive, the most popular format was digital credential, but not by a huge margin. In fact, 1 in 4 had no preference. So, however, once we dug into which attributes of credentials are most important to learners, we discovered they have a strong preference for features only digital credentials can actually provide. Specifically, learners want credentials that are verifiable and protected against fraud, can easily be replaced if they're lost, are easy to share online, and then also include information like an overview of the acquired skill, evidence of what it took to complete the credential, and the criteria used to assess the skill. All elements that are unique to digital credentials. This leads us to our first takeaway for today. The most successful issuers are educating their learners on the value of digital credentials and what they offer to their career goals. They're not just issuing them. All right, our second insight for today. As noted earlier, the majority of learners plan to take more courses. However, we also discovered that in many cases, what learners would like to see in their courses doesn't align with what issuers are providing. For example, we found that evaluating learner options, 97% of learners reported wanting learning pathways of linked modules or courses to help them master a topic. Yet only 29% of credential issuers are providing them. Similarly, 92% of learners report actually wanting projects or assessments as part of their coursework, yet only 34% of issuers are offering them. This presents significant opportunity for issuers to meet these learner preferences and where they are in the market. Next slide. So let's focus in on our second takeaway. The most successful programs align their offerings with learner expectations by incorporating elements like learning pathways, projects, or assessments, and then tracking learner engagement metrics to optimize your course offerings. Our third insight today, and we've certainly seen this firsthand at Accredible, digital credentials not only recognize learner achievements and meet their credential preferences, but they also unlock a powerful organic marketing channel when issuers empower learners to share their credentials online. This also is boosting brand awareness and program referrals. In fact, 94% of issuers who have adopted digital credentials report a positive impact on their business, with the biggest benefit cited as increased credential sharing online. That said, many issuers are also reporting increasing credential sharing as one of their biggest goals or challenges. 2/3 of learners report sharing their credentials, but on the flip side, more than half of those who aren't sharing their credentials say they don't see a reason to do so. So helping them see the value of sharing is often missing in programs. And while 71% of issuers take the first step and send an email to award the credential, the majority stop there. Only 1 in 3 send a reminder to open the credential or share it. Moreover, 44% of issuers report doing nothing to recognize or reward learners who share their credentials. So that leads to our third takeaway today. The most successful programs not only provide guidance on how and why learners can use and share credentials, but also incorporate engagement strategies that encourage sharing. And they engage with the learners who share their credentials. The fourth insight we found, similar to the disconnect we spoke about earlier between what learners were looking for when enrolling in courses and what issuers are providing, issuers are missing a significant opportunity to meet learner expectation post-course completion in order to retain them. 84% of learners want to be included in an online directory for prospective employers, but only 35% of issuers are offering this value add. And 94% of learners want additional course recommendations to meet their career goals. But unfortunately, 1 in 4 aren't taking courses because they don't know what to take next. When asked what course recommendations they provide learners, 37% of issuers report they don't have a process for this, with another 24 reporting that their process is ad hoc. So they share their catalog to learners for review. With 92% of learners planning to take an additional course that offers a credential in the next 2 years, this presents a pretty significant opportunity for issuers to better engage learners post-course completion to generate ongoing revenue and expansion. Which leads us to our fourth takeaway from this. Successful issuers are more likely to make personalized recommendations based on which courses a learner has already taken. They also create additional learner value and connect them with future opportunities by recognizing recipients in an online directory. And then our last insight for today, we found that many programs lack visibility into how to improve their programs. When looking at program metrics, less than half of issuers track what content of courses learners are most engaged with, which learners are most engaged, what course completion times there are, and where learners drop off. Only 54% of issuers track which learners complete a course. And then surprisingly, only 23% track which learners take additional courses. And then only 13% of issuers are tracking program referrals from shared credentials. Without these insights, it becomes really hard to know what is or isn't working and refine a program strategy accordingly. So that leads us to, next slide, our last takeaway today. Successful issuers are more likely to have more sophisticated tracking, where they're tracking things such as the number of credentials they issued, what their credential share rate is, referral traffic from credential shares, referred learner conversion. They know which learners are more engaged and where learners are dropping off, along with applicable program stats. So these are just a few of our takeaways from the 2024 State of Credentialing report. And I'd really encourage you to dig into the report to find out more of what learners want and then what the most successful issuers are doing to grow their programs. So I want to bring in our panelists to share their perspective now on some of the findings and what they're seeing out in the field and what the future of credentialing may look like. So first, I would love for each of our panelists to introduce themselves and share a bit of their background in credentialing. So Holly, I'm going to start with you, please.
Hi, everyone. So glad to join you today. I'm Holly Zanville, a research professor in the program on skills, credentials, and workforce policy at George Washington University. I focus on two major national initiatives in the credentialing arena. The first is on a national project called Credential as You Go, which is a movement to recognize the broad array of credentials that are earned throughout an individual's education and career journey, to include degrees, certificates, industry certifications, digital badges, and so many others. We call this the movement around incremental credentialing. I also work with several partners to build the Learn and Work ecosystem library, an easily accessible digital collection of resources to help the field better understand the really complex components of the Learn and Work ecosystem that we all share. And there are things at the library, such as terms that are being used, the many initiatives and organizations that are working to improve components of the ecosystem. And our librarian, Matt Valdez, is with us today, and he's going to put links if those of you don't have those ready links. So that's who I am, and thrilled to be here today.
Thanks so much, Holly. We're thrilled to have you too. Tara, how about you? Introduce yourself to everyone on the call today.
Thanks, Rochelle. My name's Tara Miller, and I work at Snowflake Certification. Now, for those of you who don't know what Snowflake is, we're a single data platform that allows companies to break down data silos and easily get value from their data. And here at Snowflake, we have a robust ecosystem of learners and certified individuals who are participating in our program as employees, partners, students, and customers in our Snowflake education, which is located at learn.snowflake.com. As for me, I've spent 12 years in assessment and testing administration in the post-secondary and IT certification verticals. I've worked primarily in program operations, but I've done exam security, vendor management, sales support, and for a couple of IT certification programs, including AWS and Tableau by Salesforce. So currently I'm the certifications services coordinator here at Snowflake, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thanks so much, Tara. So happy to have you. And then last but not least, Danny.
Well, thank you, Tara, and thank you, Holly. So I'm Danny. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Accredible. We're one of the largest digital credentialing platforms in the world. We just passed 100 million credentials issued, which we're very proud of. Actually, I think we're 105 now. I founded the company about 11 years ago, and I've had the immense privilege to work with thousands and thousands of organizations, along the lines of folks like Tara at Snowflake, and obviously Holly's on the research side, but many folks at many great universities as well. And so, we've been able to learn from so many diverse types of issuers, what worked, what didn't, towards different types of goals. So yeah, just looking forward to diving into the conversation with you all.
Fabulous. Thank you all. All right, so we'll kick into some questions to our panelists now. So as we dove into the report findings, we found that 63% of issuers consider their credential programs to be very or extremely successful. Holly, does that number surprise you in any way?
Actually, I am a little surprised. I'm surprised it's not a little bit higher. But when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, well, maybe more folks didn't say they were very successful because they didn't have data yet on their successes. Maybe they primarily have anecdotal information. I thought it was interesting that the survey shows that most of the issuers are only about 4 years into their efforts. So it's still a pretty nascent effort for many folks. And that means that most of the issuers are not going to likely have much outcomes data on their program successes. There's another aspect that we found with all the programs that are working in the space, and that is it's important to set up metrics and do tracking, but this can take a lot of additional resources, staffing and funding, and the newer programs may not have these in place yet. So I think that's a big challenge. It's one thing to ask for data, it's another thing to deliver the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Tara, what was your reaction to that data?
Well, so I'm not really surprised, but let me explain why. It goes without saying, success is a difficult metric to quantify, but for a certification program, there's a lot to consider. Here's some metrics of success that I thought of. Are we considering the growing number of individuals in the program or growing program visibility? Is the program successful because certified individuals see the value of the certification and are experiencing career advancement? Are hiring managers and HR professionals seeking out our credentials as benchmarks of verified skills? How about success of the certified individuals coming back? and recertifying or earning advanced certifications, really just staying engaged. Perhaps the program is profitable from a P&L standpoint, which means added revenue to our education cost center. For a certification program, the criteria for measuring success is widely varied. In my opinion, Snowflake certification program is very successful, and I'm making this statement because of the number of people certified in the last 4 years, the health and active engagement of our certified population, and the continued year-over-year growth of exam administrations and certifications. Our success can be attributed in large part to the growth and popularity of our platform, our product platform, Snowflake's continued growth in customer base, and a growing use of feature sets. And finally, our CERT program success can be attributed to our company leadership and the sales organization who truly believe in the value that certified people bring to our customer organizations. They praise and publicize our education programs, which familiarize our customers with our program's existence.
Thank you so much. Danny, taking it from a different perspective, having worked with thousands of credential programs over the past 11 years, does that number surprise you in any way?
Yeah, it does. I mean, one of the sort of interesting things, and I think it came up in the chat actually, was just looking at the demographics of folks that we interviewed. We did a pretty good job here of actually not just interviewing only Accredible customers, but sort of a wider group of folks. And so actually, it doesn't surprise me too much that, in a wider audience where maybe they've not had a dedicated, training session and sort of ongoing sort of account maintenance and management, because I completely agree with Holly. One of and also one of the key findings of the study was you've got to be tracking, the right data to sort of measure, sort of goal attainment and progress. And it can often take, over a year to get the kind of data you want. So, we're still seeing actually a lot of organizations that are sort of quite nascent, quite new to either digitizing their existing credentialing program or maybe just starting from scratch with a new credentialing program. So no, I don't think so. I think it's still sort of early days. One of the other things I think that stood out to me as well, though, was the goals that we've seen. So we've worked with, we've got something like 2,500 paying customers today, and we've worked with, I'm sure many more than that as well. And the diversity of the goals is extremely broad. So what the definition of success is depending on is sort of the goals. Some like sort of Tara said, it's all about, well, how many people can we have exposed to our credentialing program, and then how many of those will actually graduate and become sort of accredited people. Others might be more about, spreading the word in the community or demonstrating the verifiability of the credentials and so on. So I think it is quite nuanced, and it sort of depends what goals you're looking to pursue. The single biggest thing, though, we have seen, there are two sort of single biggest things we've seen contribute to success in credentialing programs is, have you gone in really clear-eyed with the goals that you're looking to attain, and then are you measuring that? And then have you got a structured review, quarterly business reviews is what we would recommend to assess if you are on the right track, how can you double down? And if you're not on the right track, how can you course correct?
Yeah, the idea of measuring keeps circling back in here. Let me ask another question, and it kind of aligns to what Holly mentioned around the amount of time people have had their programs out. So if we look at some of the issuer findings, 40% of the surveyed issuers have only been offering digital credentials for at least 4 years. And so we're definitely still in the early majority stage of market adoption. And before I ask Holly for a little bit more explanation on that, Tara, as an early adopter, both at your time at Snowflake and previously at Tableau and AWS, what challenge did you face in implementing digital credentials? And then what advice would you give organizations just starting out, since we are at that stage of market adoption?
Well, we're just going to circulate all around data, right? It's all about data. So hearing Holly talk about data and needing the need for data, Danny talking about the need for data, there were challenges even with the savvy crowd who have appetite for all things tech and IT certification. And challenge number one, operationalizing this and making it operable, right? Adding a new system is always daunting, but having the right data, setting up in the systems, and providing instruction and documentation is always a challenge. And just to dive into that a little bit more, Many of our programs, especially the programs I've worked with, have numerous systems and they all have data, but do they have a common denominator that ties them together? Can I track a student or learner's journey through the systems? I have found in almost every program I've worked for, it's almost impossible to get that one single denominator that works through the system to create the data that you need. And in that, let's talk about communication. Challenge number 2, communicating with candidates about what digital credentials are, that they're more secure, that they're more accessible, that they're easily verifiable, and even more so than a paper credential. Even today, I was working with a case and someone asked me where their paper credential was. So we haven't quite shaken the idea that we need that printed paper. What else is offered in comparison to that paper credential, like a skills breakdown presented right there on the page with your credential? Like, these are the things that I did to earn this credential. That's amazing for that learner to be able to show that right there on the page. And also just the communication gap of creating those clear instructions on how those digital credentials can be shared on social platforms, into email signatures, and into resumes with potential hiring managers. So both sorry, I can't say this word today. Making it operable and communication, 2 huge challenges. But my best advice to anyone on the call is ask a lot of questions in your RFP process to understand a vendor's abilities and constraints, and know your data and data flows. Come prepared with your pain points and questions. Expect gaps and be prepared to work with your vendors to enhance their standard offerings, and expect that you'll likely need customization, because every credential program has custom nuances.
Thank you. I'm sure a lot of people are taking a lot of notes on that advice. That was so great. Holly, what advice would you give an organization thinking about implementing digital credentials early in their journey?
Well, on this one, I have a lot of pieces of advice. I'm only going to ask a few pieces. But the first is to recognize that as an issuer, you're just one part of a large ecosystem, but the students live in the large ecosystem. So they have to understand the relationship to traditional certificates and degrees. They're getting advice and counsel from people at higher ed institutions, some of them whom are not that interested in digital credentials because they're afraid it's going to take away from their more traditional programs. So the students can be confused. They don't know the real value. When they take their records or their information to employers, a lot of the employers are not set up that well to receive them. They don't have, their applicant tracking systems are not that amenable to the new digital records yet. I think a lot of them are starting to work on it. And there's a huge body of work around developing records, verified records, for example, learning and employment records that recognize learning from all places, including digital credentials and from the providers that you all surveyed. So I would say keep an eye on the larger ecosystem, even while you're focusing in your area to do the best that you can do. And I'll just share some lessons that we learned in working with the Credential As You Go folks who are really doing rapid prototyping of incremental credentials. And we spent over, I don't know, 100 hours interviewing mostly institutional people, but some state level folks, to find out what lessons are there to be learned from your work. And a lot of them started from the beginning, but some were farther ahead. We're trying to cultivate a list of lessons learned. And we've come up with about 20 components that we think should be in place if you're going to be implementing digital credentials. And especially if you're a public institution or if you're a credential issuer, but you're going to be partnering with a public institution, there are a lot of recognitions that have to happen for the public institutions. I'll just give you a handful of them. This isn't public yet. We're working on a working prototype, which I think will be maybe of interest to folks. So it's things like having the enabling policies in your state that enables the institutions in order even to move down these roads around digital credentials. They don't all have the permissions to do that. And then there are policies at the institutional levels, strong leadership from the top to move in these innovation areas. That's a big lift. Marketing going on both at the state level and at the institutional level, a variety of curricular approaches, learner supports, partnerships, thinking about quality, trust, and value, given the number of organizations that have now stepped forward. I won't say to regulate, but to provide guidance around those issues that everyone needs to be aware of. The technology structures, and I saw already in the chat some folks asking about how can you change your banner systems to accommodate these. There's a lot of technology fixes that we need in our systems to capture this. This is part of the ecosystem, and then the record keeping verification system. So it's a long list. It's daunting, and yet it's possible to jump in and work with this list. So I think I'll stop there.
No, thank you. That is super, super great advice. Danny, you unmuted. Did you want to add something there?
I wanted to add just one other point, which is, this is coming at this as a sort of technology provider. Often, when we first talk to our customers, they look at this as a technology project. And one of the first re-education pieces we like to do is to point out the technology, the platform is really, really important. But having a whole sort of business, case around this and project managing this really well, but also just thinking about the sort of human interactions that people will have with your credentials, and have you designed the information on those credentials that will, serve those goals well in those human-to-human interactions. So, the technology actually isn't really the point. It's more, what am I trying to communicate about this person or about this course or about this school or about this pathway? Who are the stakeholders that I want to communicate that to? Are we doing a good job of communicating that and then tracking that over time? The programs that have done the best have thought about the sort of human aspects right from day one.
Thank you. And so that leads us into, let's take a little poke down a little bit further into that human aspect and talk about the learner perspective of this, because the data had some pretty interesting insights. 96% of learners who earned a digital credential consider it valuable for their careers. But we're also seeing some confusion that learners have about digital credentials and the value of those over paper or PDF credentials, like mentioned. So there isn't an instant preference for digital credentials by learners yet, but they want many of the elements only available in digital credentials. So Danny, maybe we'll start with you on this. How have you seen the perception of digital credentials evolve among learners and employers in recent years? And then what approaches have you found effective in communicating this value to learners?
Gosh, well, when we started Accredible, that was around 11 years ago. And at the time, the notion of a digital credential didn't really exist. So, 100% of issuers, let alone recipients, didn't really know what a digital credential was and what its benefits might be. But, they might have some vague idea when you sort of, some of them are kind of obvious, like it's more secure, it's easier to share, and so on. We've seen the issuers mature significantly, especially I would say in the last 3 to 4 years, where it really feels like we've sort of crossed this chasm of this being an early adopter technology, and it's more now a sort of mainstream technology from the point of view of the issuers of the credentials. Most organizations that issue credentials are very aware of, the various types of digital credentials, and, it's on their roadmap somewhere. From the recipient's point of view, I'd say we're lagging behind, probably by a few years, and I think that there are absolutely, if you look at it's a very broad church of, folks who get credentials. There are so many different types of credentials, different levels, different magnitudes. And there are these pockets where essentially the recipients demand, if it's not a digital credential, they're not going to take the course. And there are others where they have no idea that it's even an option or what the benefits are. So it doesn't surprise me, actually. And I think that, because it's the issuers who are generally, using this as a way to, help better communicate, the benefits of their credentialing programs, or it's around improving a sort of issue they might be having around maybe verifiability or sort of fraud, or it's a way to sort of add value to, the learner's life. Generally, it's actually the issuers that are educating the recipients. So that doesn't surprise me. I think what we've seen be really successful is just pointing out, hey, did you know you can do this with your credential that you couldn't do before? And often when, a recipient, if you say digital credential, I think they often will think PDF. And just pointing out, okay, well, here are the 7 or 8 really great features. You can put this in front of employers in this way that really sets you up for success. It's not just about showing you had this credential, but it's putting all this data on the credential itself about what you can do now as a result. You can have people explore a live syllabus, deeply understand sort of all the other credentials that are connected to it, instant verification on the spot, and a bunch of other things too. So I think it's just about showing, okay, what is the differential between a digital version of a piece of paper and a digitally verifiable credential? And, it's pretty easy to communicate that.
Thank you. Holly, so you mentioned the ecosystem. How have you seen the perception of digital credentials evolve among learners and employers, since that's the next person in our ecosystem in the recent years?
Well, I'm going to raise another word called, apologies for those of you who don't do drive-throughs to get a burger, but the word is combo. And for a long time, I would go through the drive-through and the person would say, do you want the combo? And I'd say, no, I just want the individual burger. And they said, but the combo is a better deal. And I still resisted. But as I was starting to work in the credentialing arena, as it was taking off, it began to change my view of the importance of combos, and that students need to understand that, particularly in a growing skills context, that having combinations of smaller credentials, digital credentials that combine with others, more traditional ones, are going to be really important, and that it's important for you to relate to your employer that you are coming with a variety of digital badges. You might have some kind of a special additional certificate. You might have an associate's degree or bachelor's degree, whatever, and that there's tremendous strength in the combo. And I would say that's particularly true in certain disciplines and or career areas, particularly in healthcare, in IT, and others. So I think it's really important to message that to students so they understand the power of participating in not only the shorter courses, but the traditional degrees, particularly when there's licensing that's going to be required. And increasing specializations that come with some of those licenses. So I think that's really important, and that's part of marketing, is to let students know about this. So I sort of start with thinking of all of us going through the drive-through.
I love that answer. I can't wait to tell my kids about that. Bring in real great analogies through the day.
I'd love to actually just double click on that. This idea of a combo, Holly, it is actually so important. I've never thought of it as a combo, but that is a wonderful way to put it, for two reasons. First of all, what we're seeing, I think, is you can get a digital credential for all sorts of types of courses, right? And some might be full on undergraduate or postgraduate degrees. Others might be more sort of incremental learning, which we're seeing a huge explosion in. And there's two sort of situations where this combo we've seen be so valuable in recipients' lives, the recipients of the credentials. First of all, it's where they were already claiming something on the resume, but they didn't really have the credibility to prove that. So, we've seen often, off the top of my head, for example, McGraw-Hill, they do a lot of training in things like Excel proficiency and even Microsoft Word proficiency. They do lots of other things too, but we all claimed that we're an Excel ninja on our resume, but they literally can quantify, are you a black belt or a blue belt? And sort of, it's a real attainment with a real sort of credible sort of backing behind it. And then also, when figuring out, well, maybe you don't have the combo yet, where should I invest my time and my energy to learn? Digital credentials are one of the really valuable tools that sort of show, okay, well, people with this job tend to have these credentials, including these sort of ancillary credentials, which can create that combo. So it can sort of help educate you in, your career or your education sort of trajectory as well, because of the 105 million credentials we've got now under management. We can start to see those trends. So I just, really wanted to double click on what Holly said there, because I think it's so important to the recipient.
Yeah, I agree. And then that gets them that more toward their end goal. And it sort of brings me to the next question, where I want to pull out the piece of data where we talked about earlier, where 84% of learners are interested in being included in an online directory of credential holders that would be accessible to prospective employers and, ultimately helping them get to their goal. But only 35% of issuers are offering that. So I'm going to bring it to Tara, because you have an extremely active base of credential holders in your Spotlight directory. So can you share a bit about why you offer that value add to your learners and the benefits that you and them are seeing from it?
Yes, of course. We implemented a directory when we launched with Accredible in the fall of 2023. And at the time, we had a very robust directory with another source. And currently, we're working to migrate our credential holders from the old directory to the new one. Our current directory has a small portion of our certified population. We're working to get them into the directory in two ways. We've set up a campaign which reminds them about 2 weeks after they've earned that new credential, reminding them to go make their profile visible. And then we're also doing a larger marketing campaign to all of those people who haven't been in our system, as our credentials are a 2-year expiration. So we're having those folks, reminding them that we have this great new directory that they can come to. That directory is directory.snowflake.com for people who might want to see it. In our own value of certification, we found that 4 out of 5 global employers report challenges in finding skilled employees. And that's why we offer the directory, to quickly and easily identify applicable Snowflake skills, which we believe is a benefit to our certified population and to those seeking them out for open jobs. We see the future of our directory as a place where our certified population can address the skills gap, right? Here we are, we're waiting for your jobs. Come and find us, 4 out of 5. We report on metrics of our growing certified community, right? We can see it grow every day, new people being added to that group of people who are saying, we're certified, we're here, we're available. We also see we can create that significant and accessible pool of certified talent, which saves money to those seeking those specific skills for job roles, even in a specific location, and down to that individual's work availability. So all of those things available right there for the potential HR or hiring manager to see very easily.
That's so great. And I know that we just shared an example of the Snowflake directory in the chat. So if anyone wanted to take a look and see what that looked like. And Tara, your answer, you mentioned marketing a few different times. So I'm going to kind of poke into the idea of this because sharing credentials and marketing is super important for program success. And we've seen 94% of issuers who have adopted digital credentials report a positive impact on their business, right? With the biggest benefit cited as increased credential sharing online. But the data also suggests that many issuers aren't fully leveraging the marketing potential of digital credentials. So, Danny, I'm going to start with you before moving and asking Tara a few questions about this. What strategies have you found effective for encouraging credential sharing among learners?
Yeah, so credential sharing, this actually took us by surprise all those years ago when we realized that this was one of the key sort of value propositions that people seem to gain as a benefit from implementing digital credentials, which is your digital credentials can be your most powerful marketing tool. We weren't really thinking of it as a marketing tool in the early days. We were thinking more about, hey, let's just make sure that people can be well represented and their skills can be showcased really well and it's secure and verifiable. And but so we sort of grew into this as a value prop and really lead into it. If you log into Accredible as an admin today, you've got all these sort of tools at your disposal where you can monitor all these dashboards about who's sharing your credentials and where and who are your influencers. And so we came in on that, when you think about it, because if you can get people who are taking your courses to share the fact that they took your course, that's a very powerful marketing moment, but it doesn't feel spammy. It feels genuine. It's a moment of pride where someone is saying, I'm proud of this thing I did. I'm vouching for it. And also, if you think about it, they're often sharing it on places like LinkedIn is overwhelmingly the most common one, where they're sharing it with exactly your target demographic, which is their sort of connections on LinkedIn. Statistically, someone who took your course, it's their colleagues, their sort of friendship base often are also in your target demographic. So it took us by surprise, but in hindsight, it's actually kind of glaringly obvious how powerful that can be. So the first thing I would recommend is bring your marketing folks into the conversation really, really early on when you're thinking about your credentialing initiatives. They should be a voice at the table, and they should be aware of the potential power of this sort of grassroots marketing tool that you have here. To see some examples of this, by the way, literally just go on LinkedIn and you know how you can search for people. You can also change the settings and search for posts and just type in, certificate or credential or something like that. And you'll see people sharing, hey, I got this award. And then you'll see 20 or 30 people commenting. And it's a really powerful moment and one that, it feels good when you read it. So it's bring your marketing team and make sure they're a stakeholder and they're around the table. Second is really, really know and understand your audience. Where do they hang out? Is it LinkedIn? Is it somewhere else? And are you catering to that? I'd really recommend just conducting some basic user interviews and just sort of understanding, hey, if you were to vouch for this course, where would you do that? Sometimes it's word of mouth. Sometimes people put it in their email signature. We see a lot of that, for example, with people who are CPA certified or CFP certified, in the financial world where it's a big part of their sort of credibility. And then cater towards that. And then come up with a strategy afterwards for encouraging people. One of the key things we'd say is, are you tracking who are sharing? Something you can do very easily on digital credentialing platforms. Who are sharing and where are they sharing? And crucially, who haven't shared? And then we'd recommend, this came up in one of the sort of the findings in the survey, emailing them 1 or 2 times if they haven't shared to sort of recommend and suggest how to do it. And then we see, the difference between folks who don't recommend that you share via email and the folks that do is, tens and tens of percents. So we've seen many of our companies have something like a 90+% share rate because they are sitting there and treating it as a sort of marketing initiative, not just an educational initiative. Of course, both are very important.
Thanks, Danny. Tara, since 2023, you and the Snowflake team have been able to increase your credential open rate by 130%. Overall credential share by 6%, and specifically LinkedIn share rate by 151%. And these numbers are fabulous, but I know you purposely are executing strategies to move these numbers. So what strategies have you found effective for encouraging credential sharing among your learners?
It's a great question. First, I'm going to start talking about those emails. There's the Accredible platform gives us an opportunity to write those emails with our marketing folks saying, hey, where can we both join with our learning teams to share other things. Now that you've earned this credential, you might want to try this one, things like that. So we have employed the emails to do those things, also campaigns. But we also encourage digital credential sharing to bring more attention to our certifications through our blog post. So our team does blog posts, which we publish about 4 times a year, which are publicly available, sharing, hey, get excited about this credential that you've earned, the market potential, the hiring potential of that. Marketing campaigns to explain the importance of certification and recertification. So outside of a blog post, we might work with our marketing team specifically to do just explaining again what certification is, how important it is, how it can grow your career, how it can help your company. We do webinars to explain the certification and help folks to understand how this will help them both now and in the future, how they can maybe stack things more in the future, how they can follow a path to create a whole new career for themselves just by starting with one simple credential. We also have Snowflake events. We have a summit, a data tour, a data for breakfast, a world tour, and we encourage people to share their badges and their progress through that. Specifically in our annual conference, which we call the summit, we have a certification lounge. So we actually look to people to be sharing those, encouraging them both, hey, tell us about your credential, and we'll give you a little extra swag to go along with that. So we really want people to feel that see that people really care about what they've learned, like, high-fiving one another, to your point, on LinkedIn and things like that, because it does feel good to see people advance. It's a great part of being part of this industry. I think we'd all agree to see people advance in ways that probably 20 years ago we didn't think were going to happen. So to see them post these things. Like I said, we have all of the learners I explained before, whether it's employees, partners, students, or customers that are participating in the trainings and then the certifications, and they're all earning these badges and very eager to show. They want to stack those things. They want to get those out there. They want to show them in order of importance to them, right? So all of those things happen right there and for them to show, and it's exciting to be part of that for helping them show that off.
Thank you. All right, so we are coming up to our Q&A section of our webinar. So, Laura, if I could bring you back in, I think we're ready to turn back over to you and share some questions from the audience. I saw a whole bunch that looked super fabulous that I know we'd love to get our panelists to answer.
Great, absolutely. So panelists, we have one question. We have great engagement with our recipients and would be interested to hear best practices on recognition or rewards for sharing credentials. These recipients from this question asker are not typically learners. They're individuals, teams who participate in various programs like student competitions or receiving a scholarship, reviewing journals, etc. So to reiterate, we're asking about rewarding or recognizing people who share their credentials.
I love the fact that we can offer digital badges to participation. I'm excited that I get a badge for participating in this. I heard that I get a participation badge. It shows our activity and our interest in a program outside of just learning for ourselves. Maybe it's giving back. One example I can give is we have a subject matter expert program, which we call our SME program, which is where we invite our certified our folks who are certified to come back and help us write our certification questions to be part of that. And if they participate at a high enough level, then we give them a SME badge. So just offering, I know it sounds like, well, you didn't earn it, but you did by the participation that you did. And I think, again, giving back to that program or in another way is one way that you're recognizing people for their efforts in that space.
I would offer something that's coming on really fast in the ecosystem, and that is passport learning passports, digital wallets, the learning and employment records, improved resumes, or I'm sorry, transcripts that are developed through the higher ed institutions. So for individuals that are associated at any time in their lifetime with a higher ed institution, and most of these folks I think are, the extent to which there's going to be a new self-owned digital badge, whatever it's going to be called, and I think they're going to be called different things depending on how much vendors step up and help to own part of the record keeping, although the students would hopefully have self-sovereignty and own it. And this is happening outside the US as well. The individuals are going to have to, I think, partner with in their own ways with all kinds of providers so that they have their record that they can carry it with them, kind of like their health record. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So the issuers can issue them, but we're going to have interoperable systems where they can develop into that badge, the backpack or the wallet or whatever it is we call. So if you all are issuing your next Accredible report, let's say, and we're all together in 2027 or 2030, I think there's going to be a lot of developments around that area of how are you going to carry forward what you've earned and how it's been verified, and then be able to share it. And employers hopefully will have systems in place in order to receive it. So we haven't talked too much about that yet, but I think that's part of what's behind the question, Laura.
That's a great point and leads us into another really similar question. So are we finding, are they actually recruiting and hiring in a manner that would encourage learners to post their digital credentials onto a platform like LinkedIn, onto their profile?
Well, I'll jump here and perhaps hand it over to Tara and Holly afterwards. We've seen, so yes, absolutely is the short answer. Especially, Tara was saying before where, look, if we can get someone to be Snowflake certified, if you think about it today, employers are not hiring engineers. They want to hire, a Snowflake certified backend engineer, right? Or an AWS certified backend engineer, or a Google Cloud the degree is no longer actually, a complete, employability sort of signal. You're looking now for specializations, and now we're seeing this proliferation of these specialized credentials being really credible, because it's Snowflake themselves are certifying you. So I've seen a very, very direct correlation, not just in tech, in all sorts of industries, between, going the sort of like maybe the final mile credential might be a good analogy, and then having employers feel really sort of safe about that because it's the organization themselves that are accrediting you.
That's a great call. Question for Tara about Spotlight directories. Are you typically asking permission to feature individuals within that ecosystem of certified professionals?
We allow the candidates themselves to opt in. So Accredible makes it really easy to make yourself visible or hidden, however you would like to be in the system. But we are encouraging people to make themselves visible so people can find them out in our Spotlight directory. But we do allow candidates and certified folks to opt in to that.
That's great. And Holly, perhaps this is a question for you. So picking up on the desire for projects to work on, are there hints in the survey or in your research that can help issuers recognize and track applied learning versus just certifying course completion? One thing that was mentioned is self-authored learning pathways even.
Well, speaking from what I've learned from the Credential As You Go institutions, there's a lot of growth in the development of those incremental credentials to have an applied component where they're working with employers, and that's part of the learning. It's part of the pathways, and some of the slides that you already presented, Rochelle, indicates that that's really important to students to be part of a pathway where the different credentials can link to degrees and the combo, frankly. And so our take is that more and more applied efforts, apprenticeships, internships, special projects, project-based learning are all going to be more and more important. And that's part of that planning that Danny talked about early. To sit down early and know how far you're going to go in the curricular development. Are you going to partner with a higher institution, or is this a standalone set of developments? And those are all critical, because when you're partnering with higher institutions and potentially employers, I think the applied components can be built in, and that's beneficial to the students. It's beneficial to the employers to be able to check people out early also. And so my take is that's the best of all the worlds, is to have those partnerships in place early on, keep improving them through data acquisition and looking at the successes or the not successes and learning from them. And that having the applied portions where you can demonstrate the skills, acquire the credentials that are useful, and have the verifications so students can move among all the different components of the ecosystem. So I think the applied portions are there more and more, again, particularly in certain career areas where applications are so vital to all of that. And the only thing I would add to what Danny said is that maybe the degrees are less important, except in professions where you need licenses. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that, but there's a huge number of career areas that have to be licensed, and the states generally are the ones that provide the license. And states are not so ready to give up certain things that are in their tradition. So I think we have to live with the best of both worlds and be innovative about pulling these areas together.
I'd love to just yes and that, because one of the on the sort of pathways topic, one of the single best things we've seen to tackle dropout rates in especially in sort of higher education is not thinking of pathways as just a linear sequence of credentials, but having branches where if one pathway isn't working out for you, can you switch and sort of capture a different sort of pathway than you were originally intending, but not have to drop out, and making that just really visually easy to understand. This is where you're on the pathway. Here are your options ahead of you if it's not working out. Is one of the best things we've seen for students in the last 5 years.
Excellent. We have time for one more question. We'll treat this almost like a lightning round. So based on the report findings panel and your experience, what do you see as the biggest opportunity or challenge for credentialing programs in the coming years? And Tara, we'll go ahead and start with you.
All right, so I'll just take up at the mantle where Danny just left it. Something that we're always working toward is creating more effective training and learning paths, which keep up with the rapidly developing products and evolving features, which that's difficult. In IT, everything is moving so quickly. Learners are always looking for prescriptive learning paths and want to see themselves successful on that path. And I love what Danny just explained. He basically explained my career in a nutshell. You start somewhere, you're going this way, and then suddenly you need to veer off, or something catches your eye, or something that didn't exist 20 years ago has been created. Let's make a path so you can get there, so you can learn, so you can develop that skill. I think that that's a phenomenal branching, the branching logic of career path. I'm sure no one else has had that. Re-engagement, that's huge for us. CERT programs are always looking for how are we going to re-engage people, right? You get that initial career impact, you get that job, but how do we keep you coming back for more and keeping those skills current? And of course, all the data, we need all the data to get those metrics around success and failure, as Holly pointed out, so we can continue to shape our current and future offerings.
Great. Holly, we'll turn it over to you.
When I was thinking about this area, I had a long list of things, but I'm going to just go to one thing. What Accredible is doing, and other organizations are also doing, is collecting information and pulling people together so that we can share, because there's a lot of highway builders, and I view us all as highway builders. And my sense is the highway builders need good information, timely, accurate, share as much as we can, look at all the questions coming up in the chat. We need these, one of the biggest challenges ahead is how are we going to hang together and provide good information and keep us all together so that all the highway builders can keep developing these options for employers, for students, for the higher ed institutions and the other providers as well. So I think I'll just stop there and say these opportunities for really good information and informed by evidence-based data is really an important thing.
Excellent. Danny, over to you.
So I've got 1 minute left, so there's so much I could talk about on this topic because we've seen so many issues, there's so many challenges and opportunities ahead of them. But the one I would probably point at is the biggest single trend we have seen across all of our issuers, whether you're blue collar or white collar, whether you're an association or a university or a tech company. Is employers are increasingly very, very open to sort of alternative credentials being latched onto more traditional credentials. There are so many opportunities to create new sort of credible credentials that really move the needle in people's careers. So it's understanding that trend and what your organization can do to sort of play into that trend. And it's understanding, well, what kind of credentials would be seen as credible in the eyes of the employer and in the eyes of the recipient? How can we create really robust experiences around that? And especially leaning into the flexibility now of people can learn at home, they can learn while they're working, they can do it in a much cheaper way, or they can go all in and do something like an MBA. You know, there is so much optionality, figuring out where your niche is, or niches perhaps, where you can provide the most value. There is a lot of opportunity for new ways of adding credibility and value to learners' careers. So I would really just recommend figure out where you lie in that and then lean in on launching credentialing programs around that.
Excellent. Well, thank you to our panelists, and thank you so much for everyone who's tuned in to hear our discussion of the 2024 State of Credentialing. We are so grateful for all of your time. If you would like to check out the insights in a little bit more detail, we have the full report live at stateofcredentialing.com. Before we break, we do have a final poll. If you would like to hear from a member of the Accredible team about anything that you might have heard here today, we encourage you to go ahead and answer as such on your screen here. If you would like to just stay in the loop about more resources like the State of Credentialing report as they're released by our team, we'll be sure to enroll you in those updates. A heartfelt thank you to these organizations on the screen who helped make this survey possible, as well as another round of thank yous for our incredible panel of experts. Again, I'll leave you with one final reminder that the full report is available right now at stateofcredentialing.com, and it will be sent to you with the recording of today's session via email tomorrow. We'll go ahead and end our poll now. That's it from us. Thank you again for joining us. Make it a great week.